Welcome to our little video tour of UEFI Secure Boot. In this video, I'm going to install Microsoft Windows 8 on a system that already has UEFI Secure Boot enabled. I'm also going to set up the system in a way that it's enabled for dual boot, and I'll put Ubuntu 12.10 and Windows 8 on the same system and show how to dual boot them without having to disable UEFI Secure Boot. Now, if you missed how we got Secure Boot enabled in the first place, well, that's in part 1 of our video series. I'm starting from the Intel DQ57TM UEFI 231 development kit with Secure Boot enabled, installing the stock x64 version of Microsoft Windows 8 from a USB key. Since we're using Secure Boot, only boot options for EFI or UEFI devices will show up in setup. Remember that only signed UEFI images can be used when Secure Boot is enabled. Now, this Microsoft Windows 8 installer is already signed, so that's not going to be a problem. You may notice this part of the boot process looks a little bit different. Microsoft refers to this as seamless boot, and it's one of the Windows 8 features that utilizes UEFI. In this case, it makes use of the UEFI Graphics Output Protocol, or GOP. The resolution doesn't change, so there's none of that blinking that you see in the normal boot process. The little wheel that gets drawn at the bottom, that's actually layered on top of the boot image that's provided by the BIOS, so there's a seamless experience from the boot of the system all the way to the OS. Setting up a dual boot system means you need to leave room for the second OS. If you use the default settings here, Windows will take the whole disk, so we're going to set up a custom partitioning scheme. I'm starting with an empty 500 gigabyte hard drive, and we'll use about 250 gigabytes of that for Windows 8. Windows actually needs multiple partitions, and the installer creates those automatically. You have 3 smaller system partitions, and the main NTFS partition for Windows. The free space at the end of the disk will be used when I install Ubuntu. So I'll click on Next. Right, this is gonna take a few minutes, but no problem. That gives me a little bit of time to talk about the partitioning scheme under UEFI. So let's go back and take a look at how we partition the disk for Windows 8. UEFI uses the GWDed partition table, known as GPT. This is an improvement over the old MBR method, which would have used extended partitions for any disk with 4 or more partitions. GPT allows at least 128 partitions per disk, along with supporting disks over 2 terabytes. This will all come in handy when we install Ubuntu in the next video. And now we're done. Hello Windows 8. But how do I know that I booted with Secure Boot properly enabled underneath the operating system? For this, I need to go into PowerShell as an administrator and run a test utility. I do this by finding PowerShell with the search function, right-clicking on the icon, and selecting Run as Administrator. Then I run confirm-secure boot UEFI at the prompt, which will return true if UEFI Secure Boot is enabled. So now the installation is done, but I want to show you a couple of things that are unique to Windows 8 when you install it in UEFI mode. For this, I'll need to go back into BIOS setup. Check out how the boot manager entries have changed. The installer created an entry for Windows instead of just booting to the hard drive. This is an example of how UEFI NVRAM variables establish boot order. The device path points directly to the Windows loader program, which I can actually see using the UEFI shell. That loader program is in the EFI Microsoft directory. The installer also puts a fallback version in the generic EFI boot directory, in case that variable gets deleted. Both of the installers are signed binaries, ready to work with UEFI Secure Boot. Those loader programs live in a FAT32 system partition, one of the partitions created by the Windows 8 installer. That partition will be back in part 3, where I install Ubuntu 12.10 and set up dual boot without disabling UEFI Secure Boot. It's not the most interesting video on the internet, and it doesn't have any cute cats, but at least it's educational. For more information about UEFI,